Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Jose Berrios is your opening day starter. We'll get into all that and more next.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. But the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. So as we found out today, Jose Berrios is going to be the Toronto Blue Jays opening day starter. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. I'm Braden Iwasco, co-hosted with Carter First. You can find us on X, Braden5, Iwasco, Carter First 2. We got lots to get into today, including talking about Jose Berrios, how this affects the Blue Jays on opening day. There is a power ranking that came out from MLB, so we'll break that down as well. And a couple injuries to go over that we should probably get into. And your Toronto Blue Jays have dropped a game against the Orioles in spring training today, 13-8. A little bit of a tough look, but, the runs are coming in, and it's still spring training. So, like we said all along, it doesn't really matter. Carter, I was going to ask you sort of how you felt about this Berrios opening day starter. It's a little bit off the wall, but with obviously the Gausman injury, which we'll get into, this sort of seemed like the way things were trending.
Yeah, it seems like Kevin Gausman is just finding a way these past 3 years to not make the opening day start. Unfortunately, has a little bit of shoulder fatigue, will not be ramped up in time for opening day. He is healthy. He will be ready for opening day, but he would have been in more of that starter role where he would have went 3 to 4 innings, probably would have been capped out at 50 pitches. Not the way you want Kevin Gausman to start a season. And with the way Jose Berrios has been pitching in spring training and how consistent he was last year, I think it was a no-brainer to go to Jose Berrios in this situation. It's going over his spring training stats. I know we've referenced this on the podcast the last little bit, but it's just because he's been so good so far in spring training. A 1.38 ERA, over 13 innings pitched, 9 strikeouts. A guy that is going to get into the game for your Blue Jays. He's hopefully not going to do the same thing he did in 2022, where he didn't get it out of the first inning, gave up, I believe it was 5 runs in 2/3 innings. But that's just another reason Jose Berrios will be playing with a little bit of fire underneath his butt. He doesn't want to replicate that same season. He doesn't want to start the season the same way he did 2 years ago. So I think this is the perfect guy to go in against a division rival, the Tampa Bay Rays. Probably going to get 5-6 innings out of him. As long as he can eat some innings with our depleted bullpen from some injuries that came out today as well. You don't want to tax them too early on in the season. I love the Jose Berrios play, and I'm very confident in him against the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I mean, obviously, it's sort of strange to say that you could have gone with 3 guys here with Kevin Gausman being out. You could have went to the hound on the mound. You could have went to Yusei Kikuchi. You could have went to Jose Berrios, and that's where they decided to go. And I think it was a good call overall. I mean, his numbers looked fantastic last year. He looks just as amped up in spring training this year, as you were saying. And yeah, I think he's always been the number 2 guy for this squad especially last year. That, it's sort of just well-deserved.
Yeah, and that would have been the other argument. I only see the 2 pitchers that could have been made an argument for this starting role. Yusei Kikuchi had a great season last season, not taking anything away from him. But for an opening day start, you do think a little bit of a consistency factor with Kikuchi would have been a lot bigger of a risk to start him compared to a guy like Jose Berrios or Chris Bassitt. But with Chris Bassitt, he's definitely done more than enough to establish himself as the opening day starter as well. Him and Jose Berrios have very similar stats. They both sit around a 3.6 ERA. Chris Bassitt's being 3.6 last season, and Jose Berrios being a 3.65. I think with this situation, Chris Bassitt's only been on the team 1 year, where you have Jose Berrios. He had a 7-year contract coming in here onto this team in 2020. A good trade we got from the Minnesota Twins, a guy that, again, his career is the epitome of consistency. So I wouldn't have been okay with Chris Bassitt starting because this guy could throw a million pitches. He's been known to go into innings as well, into games as well, deep in the games, give you 5-6 innings. The same sort of pitcher Jose Berrios is. I just think that based on the tenures they've had with the Blue Jays so far, as Jose Berrios is going into his, I believe, 4th season with the Toronto Blue Jays, could be 5th. And then Chris Bassitt's going into his 2nd, obviously. So you got to give the guy that's been tenured a little bit longer with the Toronto Blue Jays the nod for your opening day. And I love to see that John Schneider is confident in Jose Berrios, and it's like 2022 never happened. We're just moving on, putting that in the rearview mirror, and we're looking towards success for this season.
Yeah, and I think it was sort of a long time coming for him. I think a lot of these pitchers don't necessarily get the respect they deserve, especially with, I think, a huge spotlight being on the Alek Manoah situation last year, where some of these guys didn't get their time in the spotlight. So hopefully this year and with this opening day start for Jose Berrios, that maybe he'll start to see a little bit of the limelight.
Yeah, and I've been saying this on this podcast before. Maybe you let Jose Berrios go in, just let somebody go against the first batter for the Tampa Bay Rays. Let somebody have that one, because then it won't technically classify as the opening day starter, as we've seen over the last 2 years, especially. You can make a little bit of an argument for the last 3 years that whoever has started on opening day for the Toronto Blue Jays has went on to have a not very good season. When you look at 2021, Hyun-Jin Ryu, a little bit of a down year. His ERA plus was just above league average at a 102. For him, it wasn't like a terrible year when you're looking at the Jose Berrios year and the Alek Manoah years that would follow. But for Hyun-Jin Ryu and his standard at that time, he definitely had a down season to his standards. And then you got the Jose Berrios, forgettable season. Won't go into that too much. And then the Alek Manoah last season, probably the worst one of them all. A guy that was top 3 in Cy Young voting that just absolutely fell off a cliff throughout the season. A guy that got sent down to the minors multiple times. The Florida Complex League doesn't get too much worse than that. So I wouldn't mind just throwing out like a Hagen Danner. That's a guy, maybe like a Connor Cook, someone who won't have too much of an influence on this team throughout the year. Just get that opening day starter out of the way. Hopefully break the jinx and have some health and success for the Blue Jays starters this season.
Yeah, it's that opening day curse that we've talked about pretty much since we've taken over this podcast. And it's sort of scary, right? Because it is weird that it's weird that it happens once. It's even more strange when it happens debatably 3 times, right? But I don't think that's going to be a problem this year. Jose Berrios just looks fantastic, and if it does happen, then you know what? Then we sort of deserve the punishment that we've been talking about it again, giving it this much light so far in the off season. But I did also want to just take a quick look back at some of the stats from today's game. I know there's sort of lots to go over. And, it is still spring training, but George Springer has been just playing unbelievable, out of his mind. Another 2 for 3 day today, 2 RBI. Vladdy went 1 for 2. Bo Bichette 0 for 3. A little bit shocking there, but, everybody's got to have an off day once in a blue moon. Justin Turner went 0 for 1 as well, but he did score a run. Dalton Varsho 1 for 2. Alejandro Kirk 1 for 1. Kiermaier 1 for 3. IKF 1 for 3. So it was just a good day from the boys today in the hitting aspect of it. Carter, do you have the pitching stats as well from today?
I just have Chris Bassett as being like the main guy. There is a couple of relievers that went. Yimi Garcia had 2 Ks in his one inning of relief. But the Chris Bassett stat line, again, not exactly what you want to see. But we are getting closer to the regular season. It is still spring training. It's nice to get these little bit of hiccups out of the way early. Chris Bassett went 3 1/3 innings, gave up 7 hits, 4 earned runs, had 4 strikeouts, and 2 walks. Not a great day from Chris Bassett, but you do have an Orioles lineup that is pretty stacked. You got lots of good prospects, a good team, obviously, in front of them as well. Hopefully, Chris Bassett can work out some of those hiccups, like I said. Get it out of the way now, because you start out quick with the division opponent with the Tampa Bay Rays. You don't want to get down early in a season series to them, especially how bad we were against the AL East last season. The Orioles would seem like we just could not beat ever, and that trend is sort of continuing in spring training, which I'm not a big fan of. The Rays are never an easy game. The Yankees are going to be good this season. It's going to be tough. So it's nice to see that the bats are alive in spring training. But we have had a little bit of a flip from last season where we're having some pitching injuries. Some people are struggling a little bit so far in spring training. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's not too much I want to take away right now in spring training, because a completely different team will come out on the regular season. It will be a different mindset going into the opening day weekend against the Tampa Bay Rays. So I'm not reading into this Chris Bassett start too much. But the funny thing is about spring training is that usually the negatives you kind of brush off, and then you get a little bit too overhyped about the positives with the Toronto Blue Jays bats. So I'm just going to remain positive. I have a positive outlook on this team, and I'm not worried about the pitchers that did it all last season and have especially Chris Bassett having the career that he's had.
Yeah, no, and you can't. That is the sort of strange thing with spring training is you can't focus too much on the good, but you also sort of have to push out a little bit of the bad. So you're sort of in a limbo stage in spring training. And like you said, the mindset is the huge thing. It's how these guys want to approach the season, and I think we're going to see that big time in that first game. As you brought up the injuries, we will get into in the third segment here of the show, as well as we want to get into the Blue Jays rankings in this MLB ranking that they put out. So we'll do all that next.
Football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for the playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of the year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, and you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries. Today, I'm going to be riding with the NHL. I went over my bets yesterday on Prize Picks, the daily fantasy sports app, and I didn't do well, honestly. I got the Obi one right, but the other daily fantasy sports picks I had Connor McMichael going under. Actually, I think I had that one right as well, but I had Talk Talk getting a point. Matty Beniers didn't go too well. Today, I'm riding with my Canucks boys. I got Petty going over, JT Miller going over, and Brock Besser, the Lotto line. Hopefully, they can take it to this Buffalo Sabres today, and hopefully I can get back in the win column. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit matchup up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit matchup to $100.
So Carter, MLB releases a power ranking, and it's I don't know how to feel about it. I think it's fairly okay. I will go over it here quickly first. So it's their top 10. Number 10, they have the Arizona Diamondbacks. Number 9, the Tampa Bay Rays. Number 8, the Toronto Blue Jays. Number 7, the Yankees. Number 6, the Houston Astros. 5 is the Rangers. 4 is the Phillies. 3 is the Orioles. 2 is the Dodgers. And 1 is the Atlanta Braves. Carter, I want to start. What's your biggest takeaway from this ranking, or your biggest fault you'll give them?
Well, for me, this one was obvious. 4 AL East teams in the top 9. The same story as last season. This is one of the best divisions in baseball. And unfortunately, the Toronto Blue Jays are right in the middle of it. They are falling on number 8 on this ranking, just above the Tampa Bay Rays, just behind the New York Yankees. And this is exactly what we had on our predictions for the division rankings as well. I think we had I can't remember between me and you. I think I had the Orioles above the Yankees, and you had the Yankees.
I had the Yanks above the Orioles, but yeah, it was like within 2 wins, I think I said.
So yeah, very close for us as well. They have it a little bit flipped here with the Orioles being better with their spring training warranted with them. I think having like going 17-4 over spring training with all their prospects. I think these rankings are actually done pretty well. Like you're giving the Braves the #1 seed. They have guys like Austin Riley, Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson, who had an unbelievable year last season. The Dodgers always going to be up there. Shohei Ohtani, getting him. They're going to be in the top 2 no matter what. The Orioles, just how good they were last year. The Phillies, looking at them at number 4. When you got guys like Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, and then you look at that rotation with Austin Nola, Zach Wheeler, Ranger Suarez. Can't really go wrong there. Defending world champions, Texas Rangers. Again, top 5, I'm perfectly fine with all of this stuff. And I think the Blue Jays have something to prove this offseason. When you compare it to the teams like the Yankees, teams like the Phillies, all these teams, the Dodgers got huge names. Where the Blue Jays' big name this season, as well as he might play, is Justin Turner. And when you're comparing it to guys like Juan Soto, when you're comparing guys to Shohei Ohtani, doesn't really move the needle as much for me. So I think it is fair to have the Toronto Blue Jays a little bit lower on the power rankings to start the season.
Yeah, no, I think they sort of hit nail on the head here. This is a very solid ranking. I think, like, me and you've debated the whole Orioles, Yankees. We've sort of been flip-flopping a little bit throughout the offseason. But at the end of the day, I think those two are going to be very close. And I think this is a very, very fair power ranking. I think the Houston Astros might be a tad overrated. That's probably my only, I would say, if there was a fault, they might be a little bit in the overrated category. And maybe the Dodgers, I think, realistically could be #1 here. But, obviously you can't take anything away from the Braves. Very solid lineup. And yeah, just overall, I think when you look at how many of, the AL East teams are in this top 10, it's scary to think about. And we wonder why the Blue Jays struggle against their own division. Well, it's because they're 4 of the top 10 best teams in the league. And that's going to be tough no matter what way you look at it. And And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, opening, sort of week is against the Tampa Bay Rays, and how that opening season or series is going to play out, interdivision. It's going to be very, very cool to watch. I know I'll be right tuned in. I know you will. We'll probably be on the couches watching it together at that point. Um, is there anything, if you had to move one team here out or in, is there a team that you would suggest moving into the top 10?
Yeah, I think for me, just looking at the offseason this team had, going a little bit under the radar still somehow after their signing the other day, is the San Francisco Giants. They have a guy, Blake Snell, who was the NL Cy Young winner, Logan Webb, who was voted number 2 in Cy Young votes. This starting rotation is pretty disgusting. And then they have guys like Jordan Hicks, who could pitch for this team. Robbie Ray's still over there, obviously knowing him pretty well as Jays fans. And then you got Matt Chapman, Jorge Soler, guys in that order that can do some damage. I know the Diamondbacks were good last season, making it to the World Series. They still have guys like Lourdes Gurriel, who we know well, Gabriel Moreno, all these guys. But I think that just based off the offseason the Giants have had, I think they should be in that number 10 spot. And just looking at the Tampa Bay Rays roster, their pitching is completely depleted with injuries. Their lineup is still good, and they are such a sneaky team all the time. But initially, just looking at rosters and what these teams have done in the offseason, I'm surprised the Giants aren't in here. And I would have either the D-backs or the Rays a little bit lower on my rankings.
Yeah, that's the exact team I was going to say. I think the Giants look really good. They've rounded out their roster really nicely. And I think the addition of Matt Chapman is honestly probably pretty good for them, and it fits them well. And then getting Blake Snell today was a little bit of or yesterday when you're watching this, was a little bit of a shock to me. That's not where I necessarily thought he was going to end up. But it's understandable. The Giants have been going after those Boris guys after not getting the deals they necessarily wanted. But yeah, very interesting. I think the Giants could have been in there, and I think the D-backs, yeah, it was a good performance last year. Do I think they can replicate it? Not necessarily.
The D-backs were a team that we were wondering if they were going to make the playoffs at the end of last season. And that's the beauty about the MLB, is that you don't have to be the first seed to make a run. You see the Texas Rangers barely squeaking into that second spot going into the playoffs, and then them just running the table and winning the World Series. So it's just making it to the playoffs, making it to the dance is the biggest thing for this Toronto Blue Jays team. And when you look at their division, they call it the AL Beast for a reason. This division is going to be good. And you could look at it from two different ways. You could look at it as you're going to be playing good teams a lot of times, so it's going to be tougher to win. Or you could look at it from maybe a mentality, being like a killer mentality, developing that right at the start of the regular season. You're going to have to beat the good teams the entire year if you want to win this division. And as we get to the playoffs, most of the time, what ends up happening is that the best wild card seed is often better than the third division leader, usually being the Twins or the Guardians now, I should say. But it's an interesting time for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think the Jays are going to have a good season coming up. And with the power rankings, I think they did do justice with the MLB rankings. Usually I'm very quick to degrade their rankings and kind of criticize them, but I think they actually hit it pretty well on the head this time. Obviously, the rankings aren't going to be perfect. Everyone has their own opinions. But I've seen a lot worse come out of the MLB Power Rankings, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, and we got to give them props. When we both saw this, we were like, okay, this is a legit. They did well. They did the research. There was no bias or not a ton of bias. Usually we do see that with the MLB, and they shove their biases in there a little bit. But it was a good one. Just before we get into the injury report, I wanted to bring up, because tonight is the night. As you know, Locked On has launched their first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendar tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. That's tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. We are going to get into the injuries because there have been a few that have come out. Are they long-term? What can we see if it turns out to be longer term and bigger issues? We'll get into all that next. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to make buying tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. When we went to the Jets game a while back, I keep talking about, we're actually going to have one of the guys that I went to that with, Skylar Peters, on. We had a great time. We got seats 4 rows up from the glass, very cheap. It was very easy and convenient to see what tickets were good prices because Game Time just does a fantastic job. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know what you're getting is a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats, find exclusive flash deals, and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, Carter, sort of some not great news. We got some injury reports today. It looks like Jordan Romano and Eric Swanson are both it looks like day to day right now, just with some, shoulder and arm soreness. Anything stand out with those two for you immediately when you saw this? Were you really worried that this might be a longer term than a day to day sort of thing?
I wasn't as worried as in like what the injuries were. I was just worried as to who they were, like who suffered the injuries. These are the two best relievers on the team, and it just for them to come out on the same day is crazy to me. And this is just a narrative that we were hoping wouldn't start this season. When you looked at the health on just as a whole, from the bullpen, the starting rotation for the Toronto Blue Jays last season, we were very lucky with not a lot of injuries. I think Eric Swanson was one injury. Chad Green, obviously, coming back from that major surgery of Tommy John. But other than that, I think Kevin Gausman missed one start, but there was not a lot of injuries on this Toronto Blue Jays team. And now we're looking at spring training where we've seen Yariel Rodriguez have back spasms. Kevin Gausman's been out with shoulder problems. Alek Manoah's been out with shoulder problems. Then you have Eric Swanson being injured, Jordan Romano, Danny Jansen having an injury as well. The injuries have not been treating the Toronto Blue Jays very well so far. It is nice to see that there's no structural damage for Jordan Romano, and I believe that's the same as Eric Swanson. So are these guys going to be ready for opening day? We're not sure yet. There's no timetable. It's looking like it, but it's scary to see that some of the best players and best pitchers on this team are having injury problems this early on in the season.
Well, when I think about it, I think, hey, what would I rather have, when we're going into trying to make a playoff push and these guys come out with an injury, or if all these guys are going to struggle with a little bit of injuries, give them time to heal. If they miss opening day or the first couple games, I'm not as worried about going down that more so than going down the stretch. So yeah, it was a little bit concerning that it was both of them. Like you said, it sort of took me a little bit by surprise, I want to say, because usually an injury will come out and maybe tomorrow, okay, Eric Swanson's not feeling good, so he's not going to pitch. Okay. But no, both of them on the same day. After we heard about Kevin Gausman and Alek Manoah, I'm still not 100% sure what the problem is with Alek Manoah. Have they come out and really said anything specific, or is this just sort of, do you think that this is to hide his struggles?
They are saying it's shoulder tightness / shoulder fatigue. I think we've talked about this on the podcast a little bit as well. I think we're on the same page. That's more of a phantom injury. I think they're just slow playing Alek Manoah. They're not trying to rush into any situation that he's not comfortable in, because his confidence is such a big thing for a guy like Alek Manoah. He's at his best when he's talking to the other team. He's trash talking a little bit, getting himself into the game, and he can't do that if he's not pitching well. So you don't want to throw Alek Manoah out there against a team like the Tampa Bay Rays just for him to get shelled and have that confidence go right to the bottom of the barrel again. You want this guy to build up a little bit, gain that confidence, have some faith in himself and some confidence in himself, and be effective when he comes back into pitch.
Yeah, it upsets me, though, that we're having to do this. You know what I mean? Like, we have Bowden Francis, who looks just stunning so far. And if it comes down to it where we're still not sure about Alek Manoah, a piece of me still thinks, just get Bowden in there and let him cook. You know what I mean? Like, why are we giving this guy so much attention if it's not going to pay off? And if we're going to keep slow playing Alek Manoah back, he's got to be, if he's going to be on this team, he's got to be a reliable piece. And it just doesn't seem like that's what's going to happen here. So I think Bowden Francis might be the option.
And it's funny that this is sort of getting overlooked with all the other injuries we're having. Since Kevin Gausman is out, Bowden Francis is slated to start anyway, no matter what, even if Alek Manoah was pitching like God himself. So it's interesting to see. It's going to be interesting when we do have our pitchers healthy. Hopefully, at some point in the season, we do have all of our guys and our starting roster available to us. This is a situation that I think is going to fly under the rug until we do see Kevin Gausman fly and come back into this rotation and be the ace that he is. And then when Bowden Francis makes that first start and he goes 6 scoreless innings, maybe get the fans talking a little bit more when it's the real deal in the actual season compared to spring training. This is probably the biggest storyline of the season is Alek Manoah. Will he come back? Will he be effective from the mound? And so far, we've only seen a very small sample size, but he hasn't shown anyone that he could be effective this upcoming season.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I mean, we've gone over some of the injuries. Of course, there's still the one big one left, sort of creating a little bit of a hole in the catcher position as Danny Jansen is, of course, out. We do have Kirk there, which, is fantastic. But now, who are we bringing up to then have as that backup secondary catcher? It's going to be interesting to see who they decide to do that with. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten a timetable on Danny Jansen and when he's expected to return. But the guy with so much injury troubles, you have to sort of have somebody else on standby to back up Alejandro Kirk.
Yeah, John Schneider has come out and said it's going to be about 2 weeks. But does that mean he's going to be available in that Tampa Bay Rays series? Does that mean after that? Does it mean a week or two into the season? We don't know a concrete timetable for sure. There's just speculation about it. The only good thing about all these injuries is that everyone seems to be coming out with no structural damage, nothing serious, which is good. The Danny Jansen injury is the most serious of the bunch with that broken bone in his wrist. But when you're looking at Kevin Gausman, I've looked at Fangraphs just to see like our projected bullpen looking at without Romano or without Swanson, just how it would look. And it did scare me a little bit, but it was nice to see that Kevin Gausman was slotted in, according to Fangraphs' projections, in the 4th spot start for the Toronto Blue Jays. So the way it's working right now is that we got Jose Berrios coming in to start, obviously opening day. Then just everyone slides up. Chris Bassett's next. Then Yusei Kikuchi. Then it looks like Kevin Gausman will be ready for that 4th start. But back to the catcher dilemma here. I don't think it will be a huge problem for the Toronto Blue Jays if Alejandro Kirk has to start for the first week of the season. I'm okay with Brian Servant or Peyton Henry making 1 or 2 starts for that little slot. They're probably going to be hitting 9 in the order. The way it's looking in our lineup anyway, we're having the bats come alive. Hopefully that can translate to the regular season. But I'm not too worried about these injuries. Even though with Jano's history, I think he's just been very unlucky. And hopefully we can see the tides kind of turn in his favor for the season.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. That is the good thing that Kirk is very reliable in the sense that he doesn't get injured a whole lot. Knock on some wood. But if one of those 2 other guys have to come in and do a spot start for him, I have no problem with that whatsoever. Obviously, there's going to be days where your big guys don't play, right? So if that has to be here and there for Kirk, give his knees a little bit of a break, I don't mind that. But yeah, we're getting closer and closer, obviously, to the start of the regular season. Just before we sort of head out, again, we want just to tell you guys, if you don't mind subscribing to us, we noticed that a bunch of you guys aren't subscribed, that you're watching the video but not subscribing. It really helps us out. It keeps our content at the top of your page. You can check us out on Twitter or X, Braden 5 Wasco, Carter First 2, as well on TikTok and on Instagram now as well on Locked On Blue Jays. So you can check all those out. Carter, they can also check out our fantastic 24/7 streaming channel.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity whenever you guys want to tune in. If you feel like staying up late and just tuning in at 4 a.m., this is the perfect opportunity for you to do that. We're available 24/7 whenever you want to digest your sports content, NBA, NHL, MLB season obviously coming up. Whatever you guys want to go watch, just go to the Locked On Sports Today channel on YouTube and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. We have noticed that around 85% of you guys aren't subscribed. If you guys are watching the videos anyway, help us out. Just drop a subscription. We appreciate it. We love the support. We're excited for the regular season to start. We are 8 games away. It's going to fly by, hopefully, until we get to those 3 days before and the countdown starts. Then I'm going to be just staring at the time until Blue Jays baseball starts. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.